Aum Namo Narayanaya, dear sisters, brothers, and loving children. It is with immeasurable reverence and joy, on behalf of the officials of the Ramakrishna Center of South Africa, Johannesburg, that we extend a very warm and cordial welcome to each and every one of you to this evening's online seminar celebrating the Patriot Saint of India, Swami Vivekananda, and the National Youth Day celebrations on this, the 12th of January. In honor of Swami Vivekananda, a decision was taken by the Government of India in 1984 to annually celebrate the birthday of Swami Vivekananda as National Youth Day. The philosophy of Swami Vivekananda and the ideals for which he lived and worked are a great source of inspiration for the youth. National Youth Day is observed all over the world at schools and colleges with processions, speeches, musical renditions, youth conventions, seminars, yogasanas, presentations, and competitions in essay writing. Swami Vivekananda's spiritual training and guidance were obtained directly from the great master Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa and the Holy Mother Sri Sharda Devi. Under the guidance of these revered saints, Swami Vivekananda's life became a beacon of hope and source of inspiration. He continues to motivate youth organizations, study circles, as well as welfare and community service projects that uplifts mankind. As such, it is entirely fitting that the Government of India has declared this, the birthday of Swami Vivekananda, as National Youth Day. Swami Vivekananda once said, "Give me 100 energetic young men and I shall transform India." His faith in the youth never wavered, and this is demonstrated in his profound statement where he said, "My faith is in the younger generation, modern generation. Out of them will come my workers." When one reflects on this statement, it is then entirely fitting that this evening's seminar includes talks and messages delivered by 4 respected and dynamic Indian leaders who have been inspired by the teachings of Swami Vivekananda. The program includes the following talks: a message by His Excellency Shri Jaydev Sarkar, the High Commissioner of India to South Africa, a talk by Mr. Chetan Ramla on character building education, a musical rendition by the internationally acclaimed group Laya Lavanya, a talk by Dr. Ramaswamy Subramanyam entitled Swami Vivekananda, So Much More Than a Monk, and finally a talk by Mr. Chinmai Ananda entitled Achieving Success Through Personality Development. We will now commence with this evening's seminar. Our first speaker is His Excellency Shri Jaydev Sarkar. His Excellency was born in 1963 and joined the Indian Foreign Service in 1987, soon after completing a Bachelor's in Engineering from the prestigious Indian Institute of Technology and a Master's in Business Administration from the Indian Institute of Management. He served in Indian missions in Tokyo, Seoul, and Bangladesh and held both political and economic portfolios. He worked in the Ministry of Finance from 1992 to 1996, dealing with economic relations with EU member states. He also served as a director in the Ministry of External Affairs, where his work involved managing India's relations with some of its neighbors including Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and Myanmar. In 2004, His Excellency joined the Prime Minister's office as a director and dealt with a number of ministries, including those of External Affairs, Finance, and Planning, amongst others. In 2006, he was selected to serve as Private Secretary to Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. In 2012, he was awarded the Distinguished Service Award by the Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur. Before taking over as High Commissioner of India to South Africa, His Excellency was India's ambassador to Bhutan and before that to Israel.
It gives me great pleasure to be speaking today at this event that marks the birth anniversary of Swami Vivekananda. I thank the Ramakrishna Center in South Africa for hosting this event. Swami Vivekananda was one of the world's greatest spiritual and religious teachers. In the World Parliament of Religions in 1893, he presented perhaps for the first time to the world the essence and the teachings of Indian religion and Indian spirituality. And I wish to quote from that speech the summary of what he said, and I quote, "We believe not only in universal toleration, but we accept all religions as true. I am proud to belong to a nation which has sheltered the persecuted and the refugees of all religions and all nations of the earth." Later in the speech, he further explained the essence of what he wanted to say. And he said, a hymn or a shloka which was recited by millions of Indians every day. And I quote, "As the different streams having their sources in different paths, which men take through different tendencies, various though they may appear, crooked or straight, all lead to thee." Unquote. Swami Vivekananda was also inspired by the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna Paramhansa. And the Ramakrishna mission, which developed from those teachings, has had a glorious chapter and glorious history over these many, many decades. Here in South Africa as well, the Ramakrishna Center celebrated its 75 years of its existence in 2017. Even during the dark days of apartheid, the Ramakrishna Center worked with the Indian community and with all communities in South Africa, promoting a common brotherhood and service to the larger community. Whenever there was distress in times of disturbances, the Ramakrishna Center has done yeoman work, cutting across all religions and all communities. Its message of sacrifice, of service, and of dedicated and sincere thought and action resonates with people from all castes and creeds. The birth anniversary of Swami Vivekananda is also celebrated in India as the National Youth Day. And in his teachings, in his messages and his sayings, Swami Vivekananda beautifully combined the spiritual with the temporal. And therefore his message has great resonance among the youth of successive generations. Who can forget his clarion call of, and I quote, "Arise, awake, and stop not till the goal is reached," unquote. So it's a matter of great pride and privilege today to be here, to be speaking to this audience. The Ramakrishna Mission is very well known in India, and particularly in my home state of West Bengal, for all its different spiritual and cultural activities, but very notably for its contributions in the sphere of education. The Ramakrishna Mission schools in West Bengal have provided dedicated service and educated thousands and thousands of students. And invariably in the state examinations, many of the top-ranking students come from these schools. Some of you may also know that one of India's leading mathematicians, Mahan Mitra, is also a monk from the Ramakrishna Mission. So with these words, I think today is a very memorable day for a number of reasons. And I wish to end my speech by citing the motto of the Ramakrishna Center here, which is Atmano Mokshartham Jagat Hitaya Cha, for one's salvation and for the welfare of the world. Thank you and Jai Hind.
Thank you, Shri Jaydev Sarkar ji, for the insightful talk and inspiration to reinvigorate each of our lives with the holy teachings of Swami Vivekananda, who, as you insightfully revealed in your talk, pronounced the unity and acceptance of all religions and the call for each and every one of us to sacrifice for and serve our society as a form of worship of the Lord in our fellow man, with the eternal guiding principle of Atmano Moksharatam Jagat Hitaya Cha, for one's own salvation and for the welfare of the world. Our next speaker is Mr. Chetan Ramla, who is a youth member of the Ramakrishna Center of South Africa and has been a devotee since childhood. He served the center in many capacities and is passionate about spreading the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna, Sri Sharada Devi, and Swami Vivekananda. Mr. Ramla obtained his Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering from the University of KwaZulu-Natal and was the top student in electrical engineering over the 4 years of study. In addition, he was a recipient of the Dean's Commendation for academic performance. He thereafter completed his Master's in Philosophy from the University of Cape Town in Mathematical Finance, obtaining this qualification with distinction. Mr. Ramlal is currently a quantitative analyst at one of the largest fund managers in South Africa. Mr. Ramlal will be presenting a detailed study on character building education underpinned by Swami Vivekananda's ideals and teachings.
Om Tam Deshikendram Paramam Pavitram Vishvasya Palam Maduram Yatindram Hitaya Nrinam Naramurti Mantam Viveka Ananda Maham Namami. Revered Swamijis, respected elders, and dear sisters and brothers, Aum Namo Narayanaya. As we observe and celebrate this auspicious day, we are once again reminded of the sheer impact that the Lion of Vedanta, Swami Vivekananda, had on global spiritual thought. In particular, we will explore the idea of character building education, according to Swamiji, which is perhaps a very pertinent topic given the testing times we find ourselves living through. When one considers the myriad of afflictions facing the world, many amplified over the last 2 years due to COVID-19, one cannot help but feel a deep sense of despair. Rising levels of poverty worldwide, famine sweeping across developing nations, increasing criminality, and socio-political tensions are just some of the challenges that the world is currently grappling with. Amidst this backdrop of doom and gloom, where it is so easy to feel that all hope is lost, the only solution and saving grace for humanity is education. It is only education that has the power to solve the great problems of our time, to uplift the downtrodden masses, and to push humanity forward into the future. Even our very own Nelson Mandela said, "Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world." But then the question becomes, what exactly is this education? What is it trying to achieve? And is it possible to measure success in its pursuit? Let's start by delving into the treasure trove of Swamiji's works and recalling some of his words on education. We want that education by which character is formed, strength of mind is increased, the intellect is expanded, and by which we can stand on our own feet. Education is not the amount of information you put into your brain and runs riot there, undigested all your life. If you have taken 5 ideas and made them your life and character, you have more education than any man who has by heart an entire library. Now, as we reflect on the above and on these words of Swamiji, what emerges from Swamiji's words is this idea of a holistic approach to education, one which focuses on the development of morality, character, and inner strength, and not simply on intellectual knowledge. This is profoundly different from the prevailing Western perspective, which has largely viewed education as the pursuit of the latter. It has really only been in Eastern thought, particularly in our own rich Hindu culture and heritage, going back millennia, where this balanced approach to education was developed, which incorporated both secular and spiritual learning. The importance of this spiritual aspect, which is the cornerstone of our culture and faith, was recognized by the great rishis and sages of yore, and passing on this knowledge from generation to generation was seen as a crucial stage in the educational journey of all individuals. Even the great Rabindranath Tagore said, "The highest education is that which does not merely give us information, but makes our life in harmony with all existence." Let us dwell a while longer on these two aspects of education, that is, the secular and spiritual. For too long, and for perhaps most of human history, the education of man was characterized by secular knowledge. This included knowledge of the sciences, governance, law, economics, and so forth. Whilst all necessary for living in the world, and each very important in their own right, the puzzle is still very much incomplete without spirituality and spiritual education. For it is here where the true character building happens, and where the ideals of Swamiji come to life. A spiritual education is more fundamental. It forms a basis and a foundation upon which secular knowledge can be set. Without this foundation of spirituality, the vast body of secular knowledge is at risk of running wild and untamed, with nothing to rein it in. The blind pursuit of intellectual prowess and accumulation of worldly knowledge can begin to breed arrogance, and creates a fertile ground for the ego to take hold, which can become a very destructive force in its own right. This is not man-making, character-building education. This type of education is incapable of serving humanity, nor of being a tool to solve the problems of the world. We are indeed very fortunate to belong to the Ramakrishna movement, and the practical teachings of the Master, Holy Mother, Swamiji, and their disciples have made these ancient Vedantic ideas tangible and applicable to us as youth and householders. Understanding morality, understanding our own innate divinity, and recognizing the same divinity in all beings is perhaps one of the most important ideas taught in Vedanta. Seeing this oneness in all, being able to serve our fellow man as a form of worship, and cultivating humility and inner strength are some of the key teachings in the Ramakrishna Vivekananda culture. Indeed, Swamiji himself said, "What a man learns is really what he discovers by taking the cover off his own soul, which is a mine of infinite knowledge." Now, as alluded to earlier, for the vast majority of humanity leading ordinary lives in the world, pursuing careers, having families, and so on, secular knowledge and education is, of course, of immense importance. But even here, as with almost all things, we yet again have the practical and deeply insightful guiding words of the Master and Swamiji to maximize our success. Perhaps one of the greatest skills of Sri Ramakrishna was his incredible ability to communicate profound and practical life lessons through very simple and clear stories. Once, in a forest, there lived a holy man who had many disciples. He had taught them to see God in all beings, and knowing this, to bow low before them all. One day, a disciple went to the forest to gather wood for the sacrificial fire. Suddenly he heard an outcry, "Get out of the way! A mad elephant is coming!" Everyone except the disciple of the holy man took to their heels. The disciple stood still and reasoned that the elephant was also God, but just in another form. If that was the case, then why should he run away from it? He stood still, bowed low before the charging animal, and began to glorify it. The mahout, or the rider of the elephant, was shouting frantically, "Run away, run away!" But the disciple didn't move. The animal seized him with his trunk and cast him aside violently and carried on its way. Hurt, battered and bruised, the disciple lay unconscious on the ground for some time. Hearing what happened, his guru and brother disciples quickly came to him and carried him back to the hermitage. After some rest, and eventually regaining consciousness, someone asked the disciple, "You knew that the elephant was charging. Why didn't you move out of the way?" The disciple replied, "Our teacher had told us that God himself has taken all these forms, of animals as well as men. Therefore, thinking it was only the elephant god that was coming, I didn't run away." At this, the teacher said, "Yes, my child, it is true that the elephant god was coming, but the mahout god forbade you to stay there. Since all are manifestations of God, why didn't you trust the mahout's words? You should have heeded the words of the mahout god." This well-known parable of the master demonstrates a few important points. Firstly, God indeed dwells in all beings, including the holy and unholy, the righteous and unrighteous. However, it is up to us to cultivate the power of discrimination and to avoid association with those of an unrighteous character. Secondly, from the story, we also learn the importance of developing sensibility in our approach to life. Having a questioning mind that is able to think deeply, reason, and not simply take things at face value is arguably one of the greatest tools for us to develop. There is a well-known phrase that common sense is sometimes not that common. And this story is a brilliant example of that. Living in the world is fraught with complex challenges and pitfalls, and being able to reason carefully and having a sensible, balanced approach goes a long way in helping us navigate our way through them. Very often, as youth, and even into adulthood, we tend to believe everything that we are told, often at face value. Swamiji was an extreme non-believer in living life in this manner, and his life was testament to this fact. Even from his boyhood days, young Narayan questioned everything and refused to be convinced solely on the words of others. When told that he and his friends should not play in a tree because it was supposedly haunted, Narayan simply laughed it off and did not pay heed to these words, as there was no proof at all of such an apparition. Even in later life, Swamiji tested his own guru, Sri Ramakrishna, to see whether he really could not touch money. It is only by having this probing attitude, by questioning what we see around us, that we can start to understand the world better, and ultimately understand our true nature. Swamiji said, Do not believe a thing because you read it in a book. Do not believe a thing because another has said it. Find out the truth for yourself. That is realization. Swami Vivekananda believed that there is only one true method to attain knowledge, and that is concentration. The very essence of education, according to Swamiji, is concentration of the mind. He used to say, from the lowest man to the highest yogi, all have to use the same method to attain knowledge. 90% of thought force is wasted by the ordinary human being, and therefore he is constantly committing blunders. The trained man or mind never makes a mistake. Swamiji declared, to me, the very essence of education is concentration of the mind, and not the collection of information. If I had to do my education again, I would not study details at all. I would develop the power of concentration and detachment, and then, with a perfect instrument, collect information at will. On its own, however, concentration would not be enough to help us overcome all the challenges we face in our daily lives. Cue the next important and often underappreciated weapon in our educational arsenal, as stressed by Swamiji, and that is willpower. Willpower is necessary not only to conduct the learning process, but also to strengthen one's character. We as youth and householders are faced with many moral decisions on a daily basis, and most of the time it comes down to the strength of our will. When do we say no, and when do we say yes? For it is this ability to discriminate between what will help us progress in life and what will hinder us that makes all the difference in each of our individual life journeys. If we have this ability and strength to make the right choices, then challenges and problems may not be created at all. And as we know, prevention is always better than cure. This leads us to the last and one of the most crucial ideas that Swamiji teaches us, and that is the power of faith. No matter how great the difficulty, no matter how overwhelming the challenge may seem, we must never lose faith. Within us lies all power, all potential to achieve anything in this world. The fundamental message of the entire Ramakrishna movement is that we are all, in essence, divine beings. This is a guarantee that our holy trio has given to us. So who are we to doubt them and doubt ourselves? If we have supreme faith and belief in our capabilities, then there will be nothing for us to fear in this life. Swamiji himself proclaimed, faith, faith, faith in ourselves, faith in God. This is the secret of greatness. All the powers in the universe are already ours. It is we who put our hands before our eyes and cry that it is dark. So, in summary, from the perspective of the Ramakrishna Vivekananda philosophy, it is holistic human excellence that should be the objective of education. This is characterized by simultaneous and harmonious development of body, mind, and soul. It is only when knowledge begins to rise to the level of wisdom that we know education is progressing correctly. The method of turning our intention inwards, of investigating the powers of the inner man and our inner selves, and understanding our inherent potentialities, this is the true art of education. Moral strength and inner toughness should be cultivated through a well-balanced and disciplined life. Looking at the present day, when all indicators of social and economic progress have generally been trending upwards, it is only this holistic, character-building education that will ensure that these material achievements will not be gained at the cost of our values, morality, inner peace, and human relationships. In conclusion, I would like to quote some extracts from the complete works of Swamiji. As always, we should reflect on these powerful words and think about them deeply. Let us consider how they relate to our individual journeys of building character, and perhaps assess whether we are on the right path. I quote, "The education which does not help the common mass of people to equip themselves for the struggle of life, which does not bring out strength of character, a spirit of philanthropy, and the courage of a lion, is it even worth the name? Real education is that which enables one to stand on one's own legs. The ideal of all education, all training, should be this man-making. But instead of that, we are always trying to polish up the outside. What use in polishing up the outside when there is no inside? The end and aim of all training is to make the man grow. The man who influences, who throws his magic, as it were, upon his fellow beings, is a dynamo of power. And when that man is ready, he can do anything and everything he likes. That personality, when put upon anything, will make it work. Neither money pays, nor name, nor fame, nor learning. It is character that can cleave through the adamantine walls of difficulties. What our country now wants are muscles of iron and nerves of steel, gigantic wills which nothing can resist, which can penetrate into the mysteries and secrets of the universe and accomplish their purpose in any fashion, even if it meant going down to the bottom of the ocean and meeting death face to face. It is man-making religion that we want. It is man-making theories that we want. It is man-making education all round that we want. Hari Om Tat Sat.
Thank you, Mr. Ramla, for that insightful talk. You have inspirationally extolled the ideas and ideals of Swami Vivekananda with regard to education that is character building. The Ramakrishna Center of South Africa, Johannesburg, seeks to ensure that children who attend the weekly children's classes conducted by the center are indeed provided with education that is character building, strengthens the mind, and expands the intellect, as guided by the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna, Sri Sardara Devi, and Swami Vivekananda. Our next item in tonight's seminar is a performance by internationally acclaimed percussion ensemble Laya Lavanya, the brainchild of Gana Kala Shri, Laya Kala Pratibhamani, and Vidwan Anur Anatha Krishna Sharma, which was formed in 2009. Laya Lavanya presents many innovative concepts which are thought-provoking and critically acclaimed. The thoughts and ideas of Laya Lavanya concentrates on various aspects of rhythm which impress the stalwarts and is enjoyable by the common man. Their presentation is always unique with high energy and enthusiasm. Some of their highlights are recitals of traditional shlokas with a rhythmic backing, renditions of polyrhythmic konakol or mouth percussions, which are an intelligent way of incorporating folk and other various instruments amidst their percussion ensemble, is commendable. They have been collaborating with many internationally acclaimed artists. A remarkable presentation, Patra Nada Vaibhava, directed by music virtuoso Vidwan Anur Annath Krishna Sharma, has the team playing on domestic households and other various non-instruments. Laya Lavanya has performed at various prestigious venues all around India. This evening's percussion ensemble will be performed by Vidwan Anur Vinod Shyam, concept and direction, Vidwan Panindra Sharma Anur, vocal, Vidwan Anur Vinod Shyam, mridangam, Vidwan Anur Sunad Kanjira, Vidwan Pranav Dat Morshing, and finally Vidwan Sai Vamsi, rhythm pad. We will now hand over to Laya Lavanya.
Namaskaram to all. We are today performing on the account of National Youth Day, which also happens to be Swami Vivekananda Jayanti. Today we have with us Anur Panindra Sharma on vocal, Sunad Anur on kanjira, Pranav Dutt on morching, Sai Vamshi on rhythm pad, myself Vinod on mridangam. We sincerely thank Swami Swatma Ramananda Ji Maharaj Ji for having us perform today. We consider this a blessing to be performing on this occasion. Once again, welcome you all.
Ganapate Namo Namo Shankari Tanaya Namo Namo Ganapate Namo Namo Shankari Tanaya Namo Namo Ganapate Namo Namo Shankari Tanaya Namo Namo Ganapate Namo 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 Gam Jaydev Sharade Jaydev Sharade Vidya Visharade Jaydev Sharade Vidya Visharade Jaydev Sharade Vidya Visharade Vidya Buddhi Prade Varade Shubhade Jaydev Sharade Vidya Visharade Vidya Buddhi Prade Varade ni sa ni da pa ma ga ni sa ma ba ga ma ba ni ga ma ba da ni sa ni da pa ma ga ni sa ma ba ga ma ba ni ga ma ba da ni sa ni da pa ma ga ni sa ga ma ba ni ga ma ba sa ni ga ma ba da ni sa ni da pa ma ga ni sa ga ma ba ni ga ma ba sa ni ga ma ba da ni sa ni da pa ma ga ni sa ni ga ma ba sa ni ga ma ba ni sa ni ga ma ba da ni sa ni da pa ma ga ni sa ni ga ma ba sa ni ga ma ba ni sa ni ga ma ba da ni sa ni da pa ma ga ni sa ni sa ni da pa ni sa ni ga ni sa ni ga ma ba ma ba da ni sa ni sa ni sa ni da ni da pa da ni sa ni ga ni sa ma ba da ni ni sa ni da ga ma ba da pa ma ga ni da ni sa ni da ni sa ni da pa ma ga ni ga ma da ye devi sare 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 da ni da pa da ni sa ni ga ni sa ga ni sa ni da pa ma da ni ni sa ni da ni sa ni da pa ga ma ba da pa ma ga ni ga ma da ye devi sharate vidya vidya buddhi prade varade shubhade jaya devi ब्रह्मदेश्वरी देवी वागीश्वरी पाहि परमेश्वरी तुषार शिखरेश्वरी ब्रह्मदेश्वरी देवी वागीश्वरी पाहि परमेश्वरी तुषार शिखरेश्वरी भावरागलय ताळ ज्ञान विनोदे
Thank you, Laya Lavanya, for that inspiring and uplifting musical rendition. As artists, your music has been transformed into a form of worship. We are reminded of Swami Vivekananda, who said that music is the highest art, and those who understand is the highest worship. Our next speaker is Dr. Ramaswamy Balasubramanyam. Dr. Balasubramanyam is a development scholar, author, public policy advocate, and leadership trainer known for his pioneering development work with rural and tribal people in Sarkar and Mysore in Karnataka, India. He founded the Swami Vivekananda Youth Movement, a development organization, when he was 19. After spending 26 years in development work among rural and tribal people, he pursued academic degrees in leadership, organizational development, and public policy. He was the Frank H.T. Rhodes Professor at Cornell University between 2012 and 2014 and continues to hold academic positions in Cornell and other universities. His books, Voices from the Grassroots and I, the Citizen, are compilations of narratives and reflections of a development expert and are now globally acclaimed. He is the founder and chairman of the grassroots research and advocacy movement known as GRAM, a public policy think tank based out of Mysore. Inspired by the message of Swami Vivekananda, he sees his life mission as building a resurgent India by inspiring leadership in the youth of the country.
Namaste and my greetings to all the devotees of the Ramakrishna Ashram, Johannesburg, on the occasion of the Vivekananda Jayanti, January 12th, 2022. It's indeed a privilege to be sharing some of my thoughts with all of you today. Talking about Swami Vivekananda is something which is an opportunity for each one of us to re-look at what we understand from the message of this extraordinary person. Now, each of us sees Swamiji in different ways, and my own life has been a constant progress, a constant evolution of understanding Swamiji and his message in several different ways at different stages of my own life. I first came across the extraordinary work of Vivekananda at the very tender age of 17. As a young man who had visited the Ramakrishna Ashram in Bangalore, started spending some time in the library, and over 2 months pretty much read all the 8 volumes of the complete works of Swami Vivekananda. I must confess that I just read them. I'm not even too sure how much I understood it. But then Vivekananda and his message has got a very magical quality in it. Once the message sort of seeps through your body, through your mind, through your thoughts, it creates its own change and evolution inside you. For me, I was no different. 2 of his books, His Call to the Nation and to the Youth of India, impacted my life and changed it completely. For someone who would just join an engineering program, very disheartened with what I was studying, and suddenly getting into a medical program meant a message, a divine message that I received from Swami Vivekananda. And from that day, my understanding, or I could even say my journey of trying to understand Swamiji began. Initially, I just saw him as a man who inspired young people. And for me, in my pre-university college days, what we call the 11th and 12th standards in India as pre-university, there's a photograph in my college of Swami Vivekananda which said the Hindu monk of India. So there are 3 things which stood out for me. A man with such an extraordinary magnetic personality in the photograph. The word Hindu, because I was born Hindu and so it meant a lot to me. The word monk, because coming from a culture which celebrates monasticism and monkhood. And India, 3 words. They're just 3 words at that point in time, only semantic. But later on, the deeper impact sort of built around my understanding of these words. So my introduction to Swamiji itself was as a monk, as a man who had just embraced monasticism, which meant brahmacharya and sannyasa, and dedicated his life for this nation. Nothing more than that. But as I started reading him, and as I started discovering his message, my own appreciation of Swamiji, or I would even say my life's work has been built around my evolving appreciation of Swamiji and his message. And that is what I would like to share with you today. My thoughts, and these are purely my thoughts based on my little limited experience. I wouldn't even claim that I understand Swamiji completely or more deeper than what I think my thoughts that I'm going to share now will explain to you. For me, what started my journey in the space of the social sector and the social space of working for others were very small statements of Swamiji, like, I call every young man a traitor who, having been educated at people's expense, pays not the least heed to them. This is a very powerful statement for a 17-year-old. At that age, when I believe every one of us is a communist at heart, a socialist at heart, and we think that we can bring about an egalitarian society by waving a magic wand. And to me, these words of Vivekananda were the magic wand that I was seeking. So deep down, I believed that if I could sort of embrace this understanding of Vivekananda and go out into the world trying to make it an equitable place, that will be the best way to live his message. So that is one phase of my life where I saw Swamiji as a powerful inspirer, as somebody who could make an young man of 17 believe we can actually change this world with these ideas of egalitarianism, where he writes about, I do not believe in a god or religion who cannot get a piece of bread to the orphan's mouth or wipe away the widow's tears. Now, to me, that is music to my ears. If I can, for me, religion meant nothing more than the rituals that my family was engaged in the family that I was born. But this was something much more deeper. Suddenly, it gave me a new meaning of religion itself. So, from a monk who's supposed to be a Hindu at heart to somebody who saw religion in a very social space, it's an extraordinary evolution of how the sociologist in Swami Vivekananda very cleverly and meaningfully converted the desire to understand one's religion as something much more deeper and societally good. And that started catching up in me and my thinking. And so that began my journey. And at 19, as a medical student, I could found the Swami Vivekananda Youth Movement 38 years ago, an organization which today works with close to 3 million people with these convictions in our heart. This conviction of that we could build a resurgent India based on the thoughts and thinking of Swami Vivekananda and his message. So from a monk as seen by me in a photograph, I didn't even understand monasticism in its completeness at that time. It was just a word, to appreciating him as an inspirer of young people, an icon for youth, and which today on the January 12th we celebrate as the National Youth Day in India. It is a complete shift where I was no longer seeing Swamiji as somebody, a man in ochre robes, wearing the kavi vastra and just going around begging in village to village. It was suddenly somebody who was able to inspire not just people like me, but millions of young people around the world with a larger calling, and this extraordinary ability of this man to make this shift from a religious calling to a societal calling was, I thought, a very powerful way of expressing societally useful religious work. And Atmano Mokshartam Jagat Hitaya Cha, the entire capture of his message, is that your personal evolution, which is what spirituality is about. So moving away from a man who's just a monk and monasticism to actually being spiritual in your outlook, having that universal outlook, seeing the divinity in man and using that as an opportunity and service as a means for the end of personal evolution. So there is, for the first time, these thoughts of mine where I keep talking about young people today should find that balance between ensuring private gains along with public good. Today we cannot talk of a society in today's world with the extraordinary distractions that the youth of today are facing to just talk to them about doing societal good. That doesn't appeal anymore. So we have to find this magic of telling young people there is a private gain in public good. And this is the message I got from Swami Vivekananda. The private gain is personal evolution. And that is something which I can say only when you start experiencing it, only when you start eating the pudding, can you really accept it. And this public good as a means to personal evolution in the space of the spirit is something which Swami Vivekananda made a science out of the very understanding of spirituality itself. So this convergence of science, spirituality and service so magnificently brought in together by Swami Vivekananda, I think brings out another dimension of Swamiji in my view, beyond the spiritual dimension, beyond the religious dimension, beyond the Vyavaharik societal dimension, a man who could converge these thoughts of power together for elevation of humanity in general. So this gigantic intellectualism of Swami Vivekananda can be seen in so many different ways. And for me, Vivekananda was this practical political scientist who could sort of seamlessly weave all this together and bring out this combination. In his writings we can see this political ideology of his, where he talks about organizations, he talks about countries, he talks about democracies, and he even says in one place, maybe many of us as organizations and countries are not ready for democracies. Well, this idea might seem very counter to some of the thinking today, but he was so very clear. We need character, driven, character-based, value-driven people who believe in building institutions, the institution builders, people of the building countries, and they, as people, initially are. You cannot really build a great organization completely consensually from day one. So he says you need an evolutionary process where you are more dictatorial than democratic. And as things evolve, this enlightened leader understand that it's time now to transition from the spectrum of change has to start moving more towards democracy and away from the dictatorial tendencies. And that democracy, which is going to be based on solid foundations, will be the ones that will survive. So he talks about India's freedom, and at that point of time, when you look at him, you suddenly see the freedom fighter in him, you see the nationalist in him, and you see somebody who loves this country more than anything else. And when you read episodes of he spending the whole night crying, thinking about the misery of Indians here, the millions of people who are marginalized in India, when he's living in the US, in the comforts of a US home, and you can see this enormous compassion that flows out of him. So suddenly you see him as a very hardcore humanist. So from a monk, for a moment, if you would only see the compassion-driven human being whose heart bleeds for the welfare of this country, the very powerful, compassionate nationalist in him comes out. And so to me, a person like me at that tender age of 17, 18, 19, these were the things that struck me deeper than the spiritual part or the monastic part of Swami Vivekananda. And as I journeyed through understanding him, as I journeyed through realizing deeper and deeper what his message could be, I could see different dimensions of Swami Vivekananda. And this, I would say, it's not that Swami Vivekananda changes his message or Swami Vivekananda's message changes. They are very eternal. They are there. They're so powerful. They are the eternal truths kind of messages. Advaitic Vedanta by itself does not alter. And that's what Vivekananda articulated it so beautifully. What changed for me was my understanding. My antennas are getting refined better and better. And my way of appreciating Swami Vivekananda changed. Now, Vivekananda is something like an onion. The onion is the onion. But you peel layer after layer after layer, you discover different aspects of Swami Vivekananda, different perspectives that his message brings to you. You peel the first layer of monasticism, maybe you see the spiritual scientist in him. You peel the second layer, you see the technologist in Vivekananda, where he could actually inspire people like Jamshedji Tata to start the Indian Institute of Science. Swami Vivekananda talks about India steeped in superstition, and what India required at that time was a temperament of science. He said he called for scientific temperament. And if you look at our own work today, the Swami Vivekananda Youth Movement's work, the science parks that we build, the mobile science labs that we run, is in this understanding of Vivekananda, where we believe that we need to take the message of Vivekananda not as mere words, but as actions representing the scientific temperament into the Indian villages. He gives a call to his brother monks and says, carry a magic lantern, go from village to village and educate our Indians. And that is where our drive for our, not only our educational programs, but specifically scientific educational programs comes from. So you suddenly see him as a science STEM-based person. So Swami Vivekananda, whether he talks on archaeology or anthropology, his deep understanding, or neurobiology at that stage of where scientific progress in neurobiology itself was limited, Swamiji's knowledge was so deep. So you suddenly see him completely from a different dimension, the way you understand this message. So from a hardcore natural scientist to a economist, you can see different flashes of Swami Vivekananda, and that is how I understood him as I started getting into this world of social sector work, and everything that I did for me, the inspiration came from Swami Vivekananda. And anything that I did, I had to find that deep connect. And maybe my mind was looking for this connect in different ways. So when I started working in human development, the appreciation that human development is not about building hospitals, schools, etc., which are already done, but had to go deeper and look at the man in question. And man making being the central message of Swami Vivekananda, I interpreted human development as a constant expansion of capabilities. So Vivekananda saw capability expansion as a life's journey of everybody. He called upon every one of us to engage in lifelong learning, which he himself was doing. So constant expansion. He said, his way of looking at it was strength is life, expansion is life, he said. We got to keep expanding our thinking. And that is exactly how my understanding of human development came about. And today, development economists see that as the way forward. So building human and social capital, building that human capital in the dimensions of the physical, because Vivekananda always said muscles of iron and nerves of steel. So my sudden understanding of Vivekananda was, if you really want society to progress, it has to be an aggregation of individual progress. And individual progress should be built by personally investing on building human capital and then expanding it to include a larger number of societal communities, and that's social capital. And together it's what will bring about change. And that effect will produce enormous economic consequences. Today at the Vivekananda Youth Movement, we believe that our work is built on this foundational philosophy of Swami Vivekananda, of building this human and social capital, investing on the physical, the cognitive, the emotional, which Swamiji was very, very conscious about, and the spiritual domains. That is what is growing human capital. And expanding this to build a sort of a network of like-minded people, a cohort of people who believe in this message, to build up a resurgent India. And that's exactly what the Vivekananda Youth Movement is doing today. And it is from understanding Swamiji as a development expert. As an economist, if you look at it, and if you filter Swami Vivekananda's thoughts, as I started getting deep into understanding development economics, and I expanded my study in the mainstream understanding of economics, of supply and demand, Vivekananda and his message suddenly fascinated me in the way he expressed it. In the context of India and India's development, in the way he said a new India has to be built, he said it cannot be built by a revolution. India needs to grow by an evolution. Look at this powerful political message of his. It is not by the gun and violence and a revolution or a very violent way of understanding development, but by constant evolution of the poor in recognizing their own inner potential and contributing to their own development, and recognizing the power and potential of the so-called haves of the world, where they understand where giving is interpreted differently. Even giving was a spiritual act for Swami Vivekananda, and he converted it so brilliantly for two reasons. That's why I see it. From an economist perspective, if I have to be supported and helped, you have to ensure that my dignity is not taken away, that I am respected for being an individual. I'm not made to feel small because of your support. And look at the way Vivekananda articulated it. He didn't articulate about helping anybody. He said helping itself is sacrilege, he said. He said it's about serving. Look at the two concepts he brought out. He said Tyaga and Seva. Seva is about serving, it's about the other. But Tyaga is about the person. So he combined this understanding of internal nature, the individual, and the other societal ecosystem pressures around us, and the external nature, and so seamlessly integrated it. But in this integration, he made sure the mindset was not about giving, but having an opportunity to be a privileged, to feel privileged enough to be part of that entire process. So he even mentions about not standing on a pedestal and saying, here my poor man, take my 5 cents. But he said we need to consider ourselves privileged, that we are all part of an ecosystem where the poor man exists for me to serve. So he not only ensured the dignity of the poor, he also removed the ego of giving. And in that one act, he made a spiritual act, he made a very powerful societal act, a very powerful social equation itself. And that is what really appealed to me. So philanthropy suddenly transformed itself into an opportunity for the philanthropist for spiritual evolution and into a development act for the poor. And in his world of economics, the way Vivekananda explains, he said, India's development should come not by pulling down the rich, but by pushing up the poor. And look at the power of this message, where equity was not by violence. Equity was not by killing the rich and saying all of us will stay poor, but by ensuring that we're able to move the needle constantly forward. This kind of equity, this kind of egalitarian approach is what the country needs today. And this is a very powerful development message that I could understand from Swami Vivekananda. So one side, seeing him as a scientist, as a technologist, as a pragmatic human being, deeply compassionate, very humanistic in his approach, but at the same time, the monk, and he never losing sight of the fact that finally our existence is for inner realization, the discovery of the self. So every aspect of Swami Vivekananda that I could see the undercurrent theme or the thread which tied all these pearls of wisdom of Swamiji was spirituality and the inner potential of human beings themselves. And Vivekananda can also be seen differently in this process of understanding him. The powerful orator he must have been, though we are not fortunate enough to listen to any of his speech, which could have been recorded. But the way he wrote, and if you look at read his speeches and lectures from Colombo to Almora and all the extraordinary speeches he gave, and if you can just imagine him speak, the power of his message, like Roman Roland says, how powerful it must have been to just listen to his words directly from the master's lips. Must have been enormously mesmerizing. And for me, even just to think about it, I feel inspired. And the writing, whether it is his poetry, whether it's his prose, the English, the nuances, one would feel that he's an expert in literature. You can suddenly see Vivekananda as an enormously powerful expert of English literature. The way he uses words, the way he plays around with ideas, even the punctuation he throws in. If you can move a comma away from this sentence to the next, you can see his message itself can alter. Look at the way he not only must have spoken, but written about it also. And not just Indian philosophy and Vedanta. Apart from practicalizing Vedanta, the powerful way of reflecting Vedanta in a practical way. Others, Advaita can be so dry. But he had this extraordinary ability, the articulation capacity to convert it into something understandable and enjoyable and experienceable for common people like us. Now, Swami Vivekananda gave us this message of practical Vedanta through action. And for the people who are inclined to follow his monastic path, brahmacharya and monasticism, the transformation can be complete. But that did not mean that householder needs to feel left out. Look at his inclusive thinking. He said each is great in his own place. As much as he appreciated brahmacharya, celibacy and monasticism, he also appreciated that societal progress cannot happen without householders' participation. So what he wanted was that extraordinary level of thinking of householders, where their only constant pursuit is recognizing the divine, but while being that what Guru Maharaj or Ramakrishna Paramahamsa talks about, being the lotus leaf in the water but not wetted by it. So you needed such a powerful cohort of householders, and they were to be celebrated too. So in one, it's like, like Adi Shankara, who could be a great monk and then experience the understanding of householder life, though it's very vividly described in a story, but here for Vivekananda, just by understanding his message, you suddenly recognize that a householder doesn't have to feel left out. So this very appreciation of including everybody into the narrative of spiritual growth is a masterstroke of Swami Vivekananda. So from a philosopher to an orator, to a writer to a nationalist, to a gigantic individual to a compassionate humanist, I can see so many different ways in which Vivekananda can be interpreted. From a development economist to a development expert, from a political scientist to a sociologist, Swamiji gives us this message in so many different ways. And his extraordinary way of looking at lifelong learning, from the words of his master, he talks about as long as I live, so long do I learn. And this powerful message, where we have to constantly expand, we have to keep growing, and growth is what is a sign of life, and growth in the space of not just intellectualism, but deep down, where you can love the entire world. Now look at this understanding of him. For him, it was not just India. Well, he was a strong patriot, a strong nationalist, but deep down, he loved the whole world as his. How many of us can stand up and say that we have that expansive way of looking at life itself? And from a youth icon to giving us the national ideals of Tyaga and Seva, from inspiring millions of young men and women, and more importantly for me, I see three other aspects of Swami Vivekananda, which possibly today is helping me in whatever I am doing. I see him as an extraordinary organization development expert, somebody who understands organizational behaviors, the way he set up the Ramakrishna mission, the way he framed the way it should grow, the way he set us all a standard of how an organization should be run, the way he spoke about social work requiring 3 P's: purity, patience, and perseverance. All these 3 you need to build organizations. An extraordinary institution builder that Swami Vivekananda was, understood that if he needs to build the institution, he cannot be the center of the institution. So it was not about he taking on the presidentship of the Ramakrishna Math and mission, but making sure the right architecture was crafted, the right thinking was done, powerful way of explaining it, whether it is his logo or the values of the organization, whether it is accounting processes or the way the organization must be run. Everything that Swamiji taught was very powerfully based on. Today we study organizational behaviors. Part of my specialization and my life's work and research is around leadership, organizational behavior, and organizational development. And I must say, every little bit of my thinking, unashamedly and proudly I can say, it flows on the thought of Swami Vivekananda to me. Look at the work of leadership that Swamiji said. Today we talk of leadership not being about a leader, but as a person who can exercise leadership. And that's exactly how Vivekananda did. If leadership definition can be today described as an activity of mobilizing a group, and the resources for doing something societally constructive amidst enormous uncertainty, this message is what I could completely internalize from the message of Swami Vivekananda himself and his life. He could mobilize not just himself, but an extraordinary group of young monks whose only life's desire was spiritual salvation, powerfully combining that into societal expression, Atmano Mokshartam Jagatitayacha, giving that as a slogan, setting that vision. Not only should we personally, spiritually evolve, but also be good to society in that process of our evolution. Craft the vision, inspire people to share that vision with him, put a system and organization in place to live that mission, to deliver on that vision for society itself. And today, possibly one of the greatest organizations that I know of doing extraordinary work around the world is the Ramakrishna Math and Mission. And it is able to do so, in my view, because of this futuristic thinking that Swami Vivekananda did hundreds of years ago, more than 100 years ago. But to me, the leadership that Swamiji did was something deeper. He made sure the focus was on the work at the center, not on the individual, not on himself or on anybody who can pretend to be a leader. For that would have been counterfeit leadership for Swami Vivekananda. Real leadership for Swami Vivekananda was staying focused on the work at the center. The work at the center being societal progress along with individual self-evolution. Both the Atmano Mokshartam and the Jagatita. And staying focused on that, but not getting sucked into making it about me or myself or my ego. And that is the power of his message and the way his leadership was. And to me, the greatest expression of that power is the way he talks about arise, awake, and stop not till the goal is reached. A clarion call he gave for all of us to feel empowered, to feel part of, give ourselves a passionate meaning to our lives, whatever we believe in, sticking to that purpose, arising, awaking, and not stopping till we are able to meet this purpose. So this practical Vedantin, who saw religion as a means of service, who saw service as a means of attaining spiritual evolution, was not only a great organizational builder, an individual builder, but also great in practical management, in the way he set up organizations, in the way he could resolve conflicts, in the way he could manage and grow the institution, take very difficult calls, whether it is spending entire money that he could have used to build an organization in brick and mortar terms, but putting it on people in the plague relief work. It is not easy. It takes a lot of courage to live those things. Swami Vivekananda showed it to all of us. So to me, the message is Swamiji is more than a monk. He's much more beyond a monk. He's not a person, he's not a personality, he's a powerful message, an idea which was lived through all of us, showed us in action how powerful society can be. At times when we are all despairing, in a COVID era where we think life can be just so transient, Swamiji's message in his letter to the Maharaja of Mysore, when he writes, the vanities of life are transient. I think COVID has showed us that, even if we have not understood it in any other way. And then he continues to write, the vanities of life are transient, but he alone lives who lives for others. The rest are more dead than alive. So giving this interpretation of life, seeing Swamiji from the several dimensions, and I'm sure, I'm very certain that every day when I read him and his work, I see him differently. Several years ago, I wrote a book called Vivekananda as I See Him, and I was reading it recently, and I felt, oh my God, did I see him this way? No, I'm seeing him so many different ways. Like I told you earlier, as we sort of scratch the surface of Swamiji and his message and we go deeper, our appreciation of him changes. So as we evolve and we get closer to the light, the intensity of the light is what alters. The light is still the same, but we interpret him as different. Before I conclude, I remember the words of Eleanor Stark, the great American historian who wrote a wonderful book on Vivekananda. She titles the book, A Gift Unopened, and talks about how the US as a country, Swamiji visited the United States twice, and God presented this gift to the American public, and he's a gift still unopened. I believe I would re-articulate her words as a gift not completely opened. Because for people like me, when we open one cover of Swamiji, it's like these children who get gifts. They pack layer after layer and that gift to make the gift look big. So you open the outer cover, we read Swamiji differently. You open the next layer, you understand Swamiji a little more differently. So peeling Swami Vivekananda layer after layer after layer, I know the gift is still unopened and I can't wait to discover. And my life's childish desire would be to discover him in this birth itself, to understand Swamiji, his message, and to really transact his message in everyday life in a way in which it can be useful to everybody around me is a mission. And each of us, if we can just live this mission, the world has to truly be a better place. So once again, I wish you all today and Swamiji's birth celebrations, anniversary celebrations, and I'm sure his message will not only be inspiration for all of us, but for every human being in this world, as each of us strive to make the world that much little better and just move the needle a little ahead. And in that process of doing that, enable our own inner evolution and self-discovery. So namaste all of you, and thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Bala Subramanyam. Your message this evening allows us to delve into our own personal journeys of understanding Swami Vivekananda and his divine teachings. We are thankful for your message on this auspicious occasion of Swami Vivekananda Jayanti and National Youth Day. In addition, we sincerely express our gratitude for your lifetime of work that you have done for the betterment of your fellow man and society at large, which has been inspired by, dedicated to, and offered at the divine feet of Swami Vivekananda. Our final speaker is Mr. Chinmai Ananda, MBA. Mr. Ananda is a financial educator, business storyteller, international speaker, and author. Since 2014, Mr. Ananda has trained and consulted over 1,500 business owners and non-financial managers on the subject of business finance, as well as over 5,000 students in Australia, India, China, and Indonesia. Mr. Ananda is known for his research on hundreds of failed businesses to discover the common finance mistakes made in business, which he has presented to the Australian Tax Office, the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, as well as various other associations and councils globally. In addition, Mr. Ananda has developed and teaches finance programs that are taught to MBA students in Australia, particularly the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology, the Dussert School of Business, and the Insight Academy of Entrepreneurship. Mr. Ananda's book, Fundamentals of Financial Statements, is an Amazon bestseller. I will now hand over to Mr. Ananda.
known Manju Maharaj, Swatmaram Ananda Swami, as you may all know, for the last 18 years. I would like to convey my greetings to His Excellence Sri Jaydev Sarkar. I'm not sure if he's watching this, but sir, after going through your profile, when I got to know that you graduated from IIT and then did your management studies from IIM, and then later you did your IFS, I decided not to send my educational qualification to the organizers. I wish that we had met in person and had this particular amazing program that's been organized by the Ramakrishna Center of South Africa, Johannesburg. But however, I'm sure a time will come when we will all meet in person. Special thanks to the previous speakers, Mr. Chetan Ramla and Dr. Ramswamy Balasubramanyam. I always get excited and inspired listening to Dr. Ramswamy sir, and I've been watching his videos since last 10 years or so at various occasions. Now, Manju Maharaj, who was in Bangalore last week, mentioned about this particular program happening on this auspicious occasion and asked me to share my thoughts on how I went about understanding Swami Vivekananda, how I went about implementing certain things in my own way. And of course, I have been picking the brain of Manju Maharaj for a long time. As I said, I met him back in 2004 when I was in my third year of engineering. Now, once there was a king, and one day he got this weird thought, and he wanted to know how a mind of a person looks like. So he threw a challenge and called all the best of the best painters, artists in his kingdom and said, I have got a challenge for each one of you. I would like all of you to draw a picture of the mind in your own imagination. People went, picture of the mind. Well, mind is not a physical entity. But the king said, that's the challenge, off you go. After a few days, when everyone was asked to present what they had pictured and drawn, king was going through each and every painting. And there was one painting that caught the attention of the king. And he saw that someone had drawn the picture of a door. The king got curious. He said, who is this person who drew the picture of the door? The painter came running and said, My Majesty, it's me. I asked you to draw a picture of the mind and you have drawn a picture of a door. The artist said, with all due respect, My Majesty, for me, that is the picture of the mind. The king said, but there's a mistake. What's the mistake, My Majesty? Well, I don't see any lock. I don't see any handle. How can people unlock and open the door? For that, the artist said, My Majesty, that is the picture of the mind. It has to be unlocked from within. Friends, if an egg is broken from outside, it becomes an omelette. But if an egg breaks from inside, a new life emerges. And that is exactly what Swami Vivekananda has been telling us, to tap that inner potential that is within us. Now, when I heard this story probably 20 years back, as a teenager, I really wanted to know, how do I tap into that inner potential that I have? How can I make sure I make the best out of whatever I have? Because Swami Vivekananda said, whatever you think, that you will be. If you think yourself you're weak, weak you will be. If you think you're strong, strong you will be. If you think yourself impure, impure you will be. And if you think yourself pure, pure you will be. So the key word here is about thinking. And this is where I decided to consciously make a lot of effort to think positively. And of course, now I was attending a lot of motivational programs, thinking positive, thinking about the best. But I have to admit, after a while, I was the one who was going home really demotivated and stressed out. As I said, I met Manju Maharaj back in 2004. Almost on a weekly or a fortnightly basis, I used to meet him at the Ramakrishna Ashram here in Bangalore near Chamrajpet, and pick his brain and ask him for clarification with regards to what did Swami Vivekananda really mean when he said this? What is the meaning of this? What's the meaning of this ritual? And I used to pick his brain. It so happened one evening, me, when I was in my early 20s, arrogant and adamant the way I was disturbed with something, was frustrated, and decided to go and meet Manju Maharaj. So Manju Maharaj asked me, Chinmai, what happened? Are you okay? I said, no, Maharaj. Swami Vivekananda, I've read this particular quote. It's all about thinking. And then Swamiji has said, no, whatever we think, that is what we become. And I've been putting in so much of effort consciously to think positive. But somehow there is some situation or some person, and then they drag me, and then there is this negative thought that pops up, and I'm caught up in that vicious cycle. And the mood is spoiled, the day is gone. So I'm really frustrated. So all these words by Swamiji, is it only fancy words, or is it something that we can really implement in these times, or is it something just for us to feel good? Now, Manju Maharaj, he usually doesn't give immediate reply in form of answers. He really makes us think. He asked me, Chinmai, do you know there is a garden behind this boys' hostel? I said, yes, Maharaj, I have seen. In fact, some of you, if you have visited the Bangalore ashram, Ramakrishna ashram, this is the photo that I took. I think this was back in 2006, if I'm not wrong. So Manju Maharaj, he had developed this garden, and he was referring to this. And he said, Chinmai, a while back, a few years ago, this was not a garden as such. Pretty much on this land, grass, weeds, and all kinds of plants, they were all growing by themselves. And it had become a good habitat for snakes. Now and then we used to spot snakes very close to the hostel, and sometimes we had snakes coming inside the hostel. And Manju Maharaj was taking care of the hostel. He was the person in charge. And he said, being in charge of the hostel and pretty much of, I had 180 students, so I'm responsible for their life. I decided that something has to be done about this. And Manju Maharaj said he started reading books on gardening and farming and agriculture. In one of the books, he read a sentence that kind of clicked, and it was an aha moment for him. And it said, if weeds are growing in your garden, it simply means the soil, the land is fertile. That is when Manju Maharaj decided to get the people to whom he was paying a salary just to cut all the weeds pretty much on a monthly basis. He said, you know what, this time you cut all the weeds, and I would like you to plant flower plants, some vegetables. And after a while, what happened was they were able to pluck those flowers and use it for the daily puja at the ashram. They were able to harvest some of the vegetables which they were using for cooking at the ashram. So Manju Maharaj said, now it's the money going out to the gardener. It's not just an expense. It's more like an investment, because we are able to save money that we would have otherwise spent in buying flowers and vegetables from the market. And then Manju Maharaj looked straight in my eyes and said, Chinmai, if weeds are growing in your garden, it simply means the land is fertile. Then he said, pointing here, if weeds are growing in your garden, it simply means the land is fertile. He made me understand there's nothing wrong or nothing bad as such to get those negative thoughts. The question is, What are we going to do with it? How are we going to channelize it so for our further upliftment and benefit? This is where I had come across the saying about education from Swami Vivekananda. Now, before that, let me quickly tell you the kind of confusion I was in and the kind of student I was before reading some of the quotes by Swami Vivekananda and definitely before meeting Manju Maharaj. I was one of those students who always aspired to score good marks and make my parents proud and make sure my teachers were also happy. So I always had that aspiration. However, on the other hand, I was not interested in studies. On one hand, I wanted to score good marks and make everyone around me proud. On the other hand, I was not interested in studies. So, what do you think I would have done? I'm sure most of you would have answered in your head, yes, I decided to do malpractice. I decided to copy. Now, someone said if you find someone today saying being accused of stealing crores of rupees or millions of dollars, it all started somewhere with 1 rupee or $1. Pretty much the same thing happened in my life. When I was in my 5th grade, so I was like 11, 12 years old, Hindi was one of the subjects that I had to study. And I know being born and brought up in India, I shouldn't be saying this, but that was one language I didn't, in fact, language for that matter, I was not really good at school. There was this question that was asked during the first test, paper, second test, midterm examination, preparatory exam. So I knew the same question will be asked again in the final examination. But again, no making and remembering those words and making sure I hadn't done any spelling mistakes. I decided to write it in a small piece of paper, put it in my pocket, and make sure I copied in the exam so that I could score 5 marks by answering that question correctly. And this is what I did. I took a small piece of paper that could easily slip in my front pocket. Pretty much the answer was 4 or 5 lines. So the first line I wrote it in very small words. Second line was slightly bigger. Third line was even bigger. Fourth line was even bigger. Because while writing like this, I wanted to just open my pocket, and from there itself, I wanted to see each and every Hindi word which I wanted to copy. And of course, I succeeded. I got full marks and I was able to pass the examination. Now, once we start tasting success this way through shortcuts, usually our tendency is we want to do it again and again and again. So a time came when I was in my 6th grade, 7th grade, I was not just copying 5 marks, 10 marks, it was like 10, 15, 20. And when I was in my 10th grade, oh boy, I was like a professional. In fact, I used to give tips to my friends around me on how to copy. Now, I used to have like a small chit called table of contents, and I knew where each and every chit, a right leg, right side, this chit inside this socks, and it was there. And for some reason, I chose Sanskrit as one of my language during high school, simply because I could answer some of the questions in English and get away with it. So midterm examination, I was in my 10th standard. Sanskrit was the question paper. So what I decided, you know what? Instead of taking all the small chits, I need to do something else. Just few days before the examination started, and again, I was such a student. I was an outstanding student, like outstanding student. Always every teacher said, Chinmai, come here, sit here, kneel down on the platform, out of the class. So pretty much they wanted me under their nose. I used to sit in the first bench, and I'm sure you can visualize the classroom, a typical classroom. You have all the bench and chairs, and then pretty much 60 students can sit. And in front of in the corner of the room, you have that cupboard where teacher usually keeps all the books and things like that. On that particular day, one of the admin staff, they were distributing answer sheets to be stored in each and every classroom. So this particular admin person came, knocked the door. The teacher said, okay, class leader, take those answer sheets, put it in the cupboard. As the class leader was taking those answer sheets, accidentally it slipped and it fell on my feet. And I went, this must be blessing in disguise. Lord Saraswati is falling on my feet. So immediately I jumped and I helped the class leader in putting all the answer sheets in the cupboard. And slowly I slipped 2 of the answer sheets, which had the school seal on it, inside my bag. So now I have got the answer sheet with the school seal. So I started using that as a cheat. I went to the nearby bookstore and I bought a particular examination pad where it had a plastic kind of a thing, and I cut it here and I slipped in that answer sheet so that no one will come to know. So it was very easy for me to smuggle the answer sheet inside the classroom. And it was 9:30, the examination started. Slowly I took it out and I was answering. The invigilator got curious. What is this guy copying from this paper to this paper, this paper to this paper? And probably that was the day when my luck had ran out. She took the paper and said, hey, they have not asked this question. Why have you answered it? I had to think on the feet. I said, well, miss, I got confused. And immediately she looked at the signature on top of that answer sheet where they have the school seal, and she said, hey, this is not my signature. And again, I had to think on my feet, and I said, miss, it was the reliever, not the other teacher who came when you went on a break. And the teacher took the other answer sheet from my friend and said, this is the signature of the other teacher. And then she said, tell me really what happened. Of course, they gave me one tight slap. Long story short, I was taken to the principal and they said, we are not going to allow you to sit for the final examination. We are going to debar you. You're such a disgrace to our school. You're a black mark. All that happened. And they asked me to go home. By 11:30, I was at home. The examination was supposed to finish at 12:30. I was not sure if they had contacted my mother or my parents. I walked in. By then, they had already contacted my mother, and my mother was pretending as if they hadn't called because she wanted me to open up. She said, Chinmai, it's still 11:30. How come you're here? I said, Amma, Adu, what happened? She said, come to the room. Of course, she started hitting me left, right, center. And I was so used to getting bashed, and it was absolutely fine those days. I'm not sure if these days it's legal to hit your children, but those days it was absolutely fine. And for me, it was like a nice body massage. I was used to it. But what really hurt me was when my mother started crying and she said, Chinmai, really? Are you my son? I do so much of puja every morning. We are bringing you in such a good environment. Your father, he does so much of social service. We are leading by example to many other people out there. And you end up doing something like this where we have to put our head down and we are so ashamed of all these acts that you're doing. And I couldn't control, even I cried. Anyway, at the end, I decided and I said, you know what, this will be the last time I want to see my mother crying because of my stupidity, because of all the things that I have done. I want to make sure that one day my mother will tell that, Chinmai, I am proud of you. For some reason, I made that statement, a promise to myself. And somehow, after that, I started reading books about Swami Vivekananda. Now, fast forward, 2022, I have got multiple businesses in Australia, in India. I'm an investor. I teach at some of the business schools on the subject finance to executive MBA students. As I mentioned, I came across this quote by Swamiji, which said, education is the manifestation of perfection already in a person. I'm not sure how many times I've read it because I was not able to really understand the word already. No, what does Swamiji mean by already? Is it like within us? Is it like within us and then we have to somehow manifest? So this is where I was asking all these questions to Manju Maharaj. And as I said, today I'm an entrepreneur, I am an educator, I'm an investor. And this is something that I'm juggling with multiple things. And whenever I give a talk, I usually have an interactive session, as this is being streamed live, and I cannot expect people who are watching this, all the devotees who are watching this, to reply, because I understand there is more than 30 seconds delay that's getting streamed on YouTube. The question that I have asked people is, what are some of the qualities of an entrepreneur? And whenever I ask people, there are a few words they say. One of the things is they say, oh, entrepreneur needs to be creative. Entrepreneur needs to have the courage. Entrepreneur has to be smart. I know he or she has to think on the feet. Entrepreneur has to have focus. Entrepreneur needs to have a vision. Entrepreneur needs to have a goal. Entrepreneur needs to do planning. And of course, there are many other qualities they go on mentioning. Now, the very first time when I decided to copy by taking this chit when I was in my 5th grade, do you know where I got this idea of writing it really small, the first line and the last line got really bigger? It was when I went with my mother for eye testing, ophthalmologist, and they ask people to read those alphabets and numbers. That is where I got the idea. Now, what is creativity? Creativity is making connections that other people are not able to make. Creativity is connecting two differently kind of unrelated things. So I had seen this in the doctor's clinic, and suddenly it clicked to me, and I brought it together. So that's creativity. And when I was in my 10th grade, sitting in that first bench, when the admin person gave that bundle answer sheet to the class leader, and the class leader accidentally slipped and all the paper fell on my feet, immediately my mind was able to connect. Hey, I can use the answer sheet as a chit. Creativity. Now I had to smuggle it inside the examination hall, so I need to have the courage. Of course, I had to think on the feet, and if I had to improve from copying 2-3 marks to 30-40 marks, I had to be really smart. I had to be really focused while doing it. Of course, I had a vision to make sure that how much marks I should be copying, and I had done a lot of planning. So the point I'm trying to make here is, of course, I'm not encouraging any youth out there on this International Youth Day to do malpractice of copying. The point I'm trying to make here is, it is already there within us. Those qualities of being an entrepreneur, an investor, educator was already there within me. But the only thing is, I was channelizing it towards unethical means. So this is where Swami Vivekananda said, take up one idea and make sure that one idea pretty much becomes your life. Think of it, dream of it, live on that idea. Let your brain, nerves, muscles, every part of your body be full of that idea, and that idea alone. Forget about other idea. Because this is the way to success. And this is the way great spiritual giants are produced. So it is all about taking that one idea. And of course, as I mentioned, I had taken that idea of copying an examination. Fortunately, because of being exposed to Ramakrishna ashram and understanding in my own little way what Swami Vivekananda has said, and of course, being mentored and guided by Manju Maharaj, fortunately, I was able to channelize those qualities I had towards my betterment, and of course, doing my bit to the society on a long-term perspective. So having said that, I would like to remind each one of you, which we already know, that's why I'm reminding, You are the creator of your own destiny. I'll quickly finish with a small story that had a significant impact when I first heard it. Once there was a balloon seller, and now and then, when the sales of the balloon was going down in that exhibition, he used to let go of one balloon, and all the kids used to see the balloon and they used to run towards this balloon seller. There was this small kid in the corner looking at what the balloon seller was doing. And after a while, slowly he walked up to the balloon seller and asked, "Sir, do you think that black balloon will fly as high as the other colorful balloons?" The balloon seller was a very wise person. He said, "Son, it is not the color of the balloon that matters. It is what is inside the balloon that matters." So, friends, on this auspicious day, on this auspicious occasion, International Youth Day, I would like to remind each one of you, it is not the color of the skin that matters. It is not our education that matters. It is not to whom we are born, where we are born, what is that we have studied, what is that we are doing that matters. It is not how much money we have in the bank account that matters. All that matters, that I believe, is how much of what is within us have we tapped into, and how much of those skills and talents that is hidden deep down are we able to utilize? How are we converting our weakness into strength? How are we channelizing our thoughts towards our betterment and betterment of the society? As Swami Vivekananda said, all expansion is life, all contraction is death. So please remember, we are the creator of our own destiny. Having said that, I would like to thank the membership committee and the volunteers at Ramakrishna Ashram Center of South Africa, Johannesburg, for inviting me and giving me an opportunity to pay forward some of the things that I have learned, that I have experienced, and at the same time, so many amazing things that Manju Maharaj has helped me understand by guiding in person. So thank you once again, everyone. I hope that I was able to pay forward some of my learning, and I wish each one of you to stay safe. And I hope that we will all meet in person sometime soon to exchange ideas, bounce ideas, learn from each other, create that environment in this uncertain world, so that each one of us will flourish and expand and become those heroes that Swami Vivekananda always wanted us to be. Thank you so much. Hari Om.
Thank you, Mr. Ananda, for this thought-provoking and heartfelt talk. You have reminded us of the teachings of Swami Vivekananda and inspired us all to apply these teachings as we strive for success through the development of one's personality.
Namaskaram to all. Today we have with us Anur Panida Sharma on vocal, Sunad Anur on kanjira, Pranav Dutt on morching, Sai Vamshi on rhythm pad, myself Vinod on mridangam. We sincerely thank Swami Swatma Ramananda Ji Maharaj Ji for having us perform today. We consider this a blessing to be performing on this occasion. Once again, welcome you all.
Samajavara Gavana Ni
वन्दे शम्भुमुमापतिं सुरगुरुं वन्दे Sarvalokamahimangam Lakshmikantam Kamalanayanam Yogi Nrityanagambhyam Vande Vishnum Bhavabhayaharam Sarvalokaikananam.
ತಾದ ಝಣುತ ಝಣುತ ಗಿಟದ ಕದಿಮಿತ ಹರಿ ಕುಣಿದ ನಮ್ಮ ಹರಿ ಕುಣಿದ ತಾದ ಝಣುತ ಝಣುತ ಗಿಟದ ಕದಿಮಿತ ಹರಿ ಕುಣಿದ ನಮ್ಮ ಹರಿ ಕುಣಿದ ತಾದ ಝಣುತ ಝಣುತ ಗಿಟದ ಕದಿಮಿತ ಹರಿ ಕುಣಿದ ನಮ್ಮ ಹರಿ ಕುಣಿದ ಝಣುತ ದೀಂ ಝಣುತ ದೀಂ ಝಣುತ ದೀಂ ಝಣುತ ಗಿಟ ಅರಳಲೆ ಮಾಗಾಯಿ ಹೊರಡ ಮುದ್ದಿನ ಸರ ತರಳೆಯ ರೋಡ ಗುಡಿ ಹರಿ ಗುಡಿದ ಅರಳಲೆ ಮಾಗಾಯಿ ಹೊರಡ ಮುದ್ದಿನ ಸರ ತರಳೆಯ ರೋಡ ಗುಡಿ ಹರಿ ಗುಡಿದ ಅಂದುಗೆ ಬಾಡಗ ಬಿಂದೆ ಬಾಬುರಿ ಚಂದರಿ ಧರಿಯುತ ಹರಿ ಕುಡಿದ ಅಂದುಗೆ ಬಾಡಗ ಬಿಂದೆ ಬಾಬುರಿ ಚಂದರಿ ಧರಿಯುತ ಹರಿ ಕುಡಿದ ಹುಟ್ಟಗ ಬಟ್ಟೆಯ ಗಟ್ಟಿ ಕಾಂತಿಯ ಧಾಮ ಹುಟ್ಟಗ ಬಟ್ಟೆಯ ಗಟ್ಟಿ ಕಾಂತಿಯ ಧಾಮ ಹುಟ್ಟಗ ಬಟ್ಟೆಯ ಗಟ್ಟಿ ಕಾಂತಿಯ ಧಾಮ ಚಿಕ್ಕ ಮಲ್ಲರ ಗಂಡ ಹರಿ ಕುಡಿದ ಹರಿ ಕುಡಿದ ಕರಿ ಕುಡಿದ ಹರಿ ಕುಡಿದ ಹುಟ್ಟಗ ಬಟ್ಟೆಯ ಗಟ್ಟಿ ಕಾಂತಿಯ ಧಾಮ ಚಿಕ್ಕ ಮಲ್ಲರ ಗಂಡ ಹರಿ ಕುಡಿದ ಹರಿ ಕುಡಿದ ಕರಿ ಕುಡಿದ ಹರಿ ಕುಡಿದ ಪರಮ ಭಾಗವತರ ಕೇರಿಯೋಳಾಡುವ ಪುರಂದರ ವಿಠಲ ಹರಿ ಕುಣಿತ ಪರಮ ಭಾಗವತರ ಕೇರಿಯೋಳಾಡುವ ಪುರಂದರ ವಿಠಲ ಹರಿ ಕುಣಿತ ಸಾಸ ನಿರಿ ಸನಿ ಬರಿ ತಗಿಡ ಭೀಂ ಬಾಬ ಮನಿ ಬಮನಿ ಸಾಸ ನಿರಿ ಸನಿ ಬರಿ ತಗಿಡ ಭೀಂ ಬಾಬ ಮನಿ ಬಮನಿ ಸರಿ ಬರಿ ಸರಿ ಗಿಡ ಬಾಬ ದೇವ ಧರಿ ಗಿಡ ಪಿಸರಿ ಬಮನಿ ಸರಿ ಗಿಡ ಬಮನಿ ಧರಿ ಗಿಡ ಬಮನಿ ಸರಿ ಬರಿ ಬಮನಿ ಸರಿ ಬರಿ ಸರಿ 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 ಬರಿ ಸರಿ ಬರಿ ಧರಿ ಗಿಡ ಧರಿ ಗಿಡ ಧರಿ ಗಿಡ ಸರಿ ಬರಿ ಸರಿ ಬಮನಿ ಬಮನಿ ಸರಿ ಬರಿ
Shri Swami Ji Maharaj Ki Jai. Om Namo
Aum Namo Narayanaya. We thank you all for joining us for this evening seminar, and we pray that you have found this National Youth Day celebration inspiring and spiritually uplifting. We would like to thank revered Swami Swatma Ramananda Ji Maharaj for his spiritual leadership and guidance in making today's celebration of National Youth Day a resounding success. Kindly take note of the following announcements. The Johannesburg Centre has been actively providing COVID-19 welfare services to indigent families, hospices and needy homes since the commencement of South Africa's national lockdown. Over the past 22 months, the Johannesburg Centre has provided in excess of 30 tons of food items, consumables, fruits and vegetables, cleaning chemicals for sanitization, and masks, as well as various other items to impacted communities in Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal. In addition, the Johannesburg Centre has embarked on a milestone project to build an ashrama complex in the name of our great master, Bhagavan Sri Ramakrishna, and feel blessed to announce that by our great master's grace, we have received communication from the Johannesburg municipality that our rezoning application has been approved, subject to conditions. With your kind and humble support, we intend on breaking ground on this milestone project in October of this year. We humbly appeal to all our devotees, well-wishers, donors for your support as we take our next steps in this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity of building an ashrama complex. If you'd like to donate or participate by offering your skills in any of these activities, please send us a message with your email address and contact number on the live chat or by emailing the Johannesburg Centre on johannesburg@ramakrishna-phoenix.org.za. The Johannesburg Centre hosts the following classes conducted by revered Swami Swatma Ramananda Ji Maharaj. On Monday evenings from 6 p.m. is the Science of Worship classes. On Tuesdays from 6 p.m. is the Viveka Chudamani classes. Classes on the Bhagavad Gita are held on Wednesday and Saturday from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. Morning classes on life stories of householder disciples of Sri Ramakrishna is held on Thursdays, Fridays, Sundays and Monday mornings from 6:30 to 8 a.m. On Thursday afternoons from 3:30 p.m. is online Jnana Yoga classes. On Friday evenings from 6 p.m. is the online Vedanta study taken from the complete works of Swami Vivekananda. Hinduism for Children classes are held on Sunday mornings from 9:30 a.m. The digital classes will resume mid-January 2020. We look forward to your attendance for these programs. On behalf of our revered Swami Swatma Ramananda and the officials of the Johannesburg Centre, we humbly thank you for joining us for this evening's National Youth Day celebration and look forward to your company for our online classes and upcoming online programs throughout the year. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.